Welcome to the Patron Saints of Pop Culture podcast. I am Miguel Covarrubias.
And I am Kathy Covarrubias. And today, let's talk about the OA Season 1, Episode 1.
Instead of a spoiler alert, since this is almost about a year and a half, 2 years now
I think so.
Been out, we're going to invite you to go back and watch it if you have not yet watched the OA, or if you have not yet watched it again for a second or third or however many time that you've watched it. We're going to be going back through Season 1 and talking about the episodes, each individual episode, to kind of give us a little bit more time to digest it, as well as giving you guys a little bit more time to digest some of the things that we will be talking about. Like, let's see, what did we talk about last week? The Haunting of Hill House?
Yes. So if you still want to give us the comments about what you thought of Haunting of Hill House before our episode 2, please let us know so we can add you into our next episode for part 2.
That is due by January 20th.
Yes. And if this is past January 20th, sorry, but you can still join the conversation on other things that we're talking about, like the OA. Oh, and the OA is on Netflix, by the way. For those of you who aren't sure where to find it, it's on Netflix.
All right, this is a summary and review of Episode 1, Season 1. I was trying to think of way back when we first watched it, what I thought of it, instead of my usual summary and review, but that was a little hard.
Oh, I remember.
So I'm going to say my summary for this one is... a woman who was lost for many years suddenly comes back and she can see when she was formerly blind. Mystery ensues.
All right. Well, that's kind of a blanket statement there, but all right, we'll take it. My version of the summary is also a mysterious woman reappears after being, I guess, lost for many years. And yes, she comes back and she can see when she was previously blind, and she gets people to join a little club where she goes and tells stories.
All right.
Yeah. Very kind of vague. It's true, though.
Yeah.
She has people join a club and she tells stories.
Having watched it for a second time, my review, I think, is different because I think you pick up more things in a second viewing of something. So I'm going to say I liked it a lot better the second time around. The first time around, I think I was like, there was a puzzle that I needed to solve. There was like the videos to Homer. You're like, who in the world is Homer? And then you see this YouTube video. You're like, okay, how are you connected to this guy? So like it does hook you if you're one of those people who gets hooked by mysteries like that.
Oh, yeah.
So that's pretty much all I remember about the first viewing of it, was that I was hooked. Like, I watched it and I was like, okay, I need to see the second episode.
No, I agree. Like, after the first episode, I remember thinking, what? Like, what's going on? Like, why are these people just joining her? Like, why is she having everybody keep their door open? Like, what? So I am that type of person that when the mystery is that extensive, like, I have to continue watching. Like, I think after we were watching the first episode, I think we jumped right into episode 2 because I needed to have some information filled in because it wasn't connecting for me yet. So,
well, it wasn't until like episode 3 that after episode 3 we're like, okay, we need to stop. We need to take a break and go get lunch because it's like that time.
Yep. So it's definitely one of those series. If you haven't watched it yet, you're going to get hooked.
Yeah, and probably binge it like we did.
No, it's not very well known on Netflix. I mean, not too many people have watched it, but the people who have watched it are like hardcore, like fan base type people. So join us.
Join us. One of us.
One of us.
So one of the things that I really wanted to talk about for this episode is something that I've observed recently. I say this I observed recently because really there was a pretty dramatic traumatic breakdown for both of us recently. And one of the reasons why we kind of took this hiatus after season 2. And, one of the things that I was realizing was that so many people have this kind of sense of curated self and not really a sense of self, an identity that is the hidden identity. And I'm really pulling on what the OA says to Steve in the thrift store when they're looking for clothes to make her look like his mom. So this is something that I really kind of realized there's a lot of these stories throughout our culture now that almost even what we've been talking about The Haunting of Hill House. And The Haunting of Hill House is very much like this when it talks about that a house is like a person, that you kind of hide yourself away into these rooms, and we talked about this last week when I said we kind of haunt ourselves, and I noticed that this is kind of a thread throughout this and some of our other favorite shows that we watch, like The Magicians, and we're going to be talking about that later on this month in season 3, where we've become sort of obsessed with these stories of sort of these hidden realities that kind of exist for ourselves. Like, for instance, let's see, one of my favorite ones of recent history would definitely be like the Dark Tower series.
Okay.
Where there's more than one reality, that there are other worlds than these. That I think it's very much a metaphor for ourselves, that we have other selves inside of us, and that we don't communicate, or that we don't bridge those gaps. Can you think of any of these stories like this?
Yes. Well, obviously there's Harry Potter, but that's not really Harry hiding. Well, I guess, yeah. The wizards are like hiding their true selves from the muggles that they encounter, but it's not really like the theme. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a high focus. If we go a little further back in time, one of the examples we can pull from American literature would probably be The Great Gatsby. Because Jay Gatsby, he's the guy who, he has this big house, he throws these huge parties, everybody comes and has a great time, but no one really knows him. Like, he has a very set aside, like, personal life. He doesn't really open up to a lot of people, but he's still like, he almost has like an Instagram reality, like when he has his parties. It's big, flamboyant, he throws money around, there's lots of food, that kind of stuff. So
yeah, and I mean, it's, for me as an introvert, I would imagine that it would be extremely exhausting to always have like those ginormous parties.
I'm not
and
even an introvert, and I think it would be extremely exhausting.
Well, and what I find interesting is that these are common threads that kind of go across a lot of what I'm calling the Steve-averse, the Netflix. Almost every single Netflix series has a guy named Steve in it.
I'm not convinced. If you guys can't tell,
you're not convinced that almost every single one of them has a Steve?
A lot of them have Steves. Yes.
Stranger Things, The Haunting of Hill House, the OA.
That's 3.
That's 3.
Out of how many original series for Netflix?
Yeah. Well, we really have only jumped into about 3 of them, so.
That's why I'm not convinced quite yet. But you can prove me wrong. I'm giving you some wiggle room so you can prove me wrong, but I'm not 100% convinced.
I'll have to do some more research on Maniac before we actually talk about that to find out if there was a Steve in that one.
Oh, if you guys know of any other Netflix series that we didn't mention has a Steve, please let us know and help Miguel prove himself right.
Yes, and find out if there is something going on with Netflix and a guy named Steve. We're going to create a whole conspiracy theory about Steve.
You don't include me in this quite yet. I'm not convinced. I'll stand by and support you, but I'm not convinced yet.
Well, I think this is something that happens in this first episode is that you see that this mysterious woman who's calling herself the OA, even though her name is Prairie.
First of all, Prairie.
Who names their kid Prairie? Even if you adopted a kid that was, well, we'll find out more about that later episodes.
Yes.
But naming her Prairie,
Even
though there is a Sesame Street character named Prairie Dawn, and she's that blonde, like kind of unassuming.
Yeah, she's like really little. She
yeah.
has blonde hair, wears a prairie dress, I guess.
Yeah. But I think this is something that begins that thread in this very first episode, that she's calling these people to a deeper understanding, not just of themselves, but a deeper understanding of self. It's one of these things that I was kind of caught on over the past couple of months was this kind of deeper understanding of self. Is that I felt kind of all my life, I really felt like I was destined for something. Like I was meant for something. I was meant for something big, and that I was going to be special, and I was going to be like this very important person, and going to change the world, and blah blah blah. And
Are you going to be a special and fix the Craggle, like in the Lego Movie?
No, I'm just going to be more like a superhero, or the next Billy Graham or something.
Billy Graham.
Yes, because he was probably the greatest evangelical of the modern era. I'm not going to mention his son because I do not like his son, if you've heard any of our recent episodes. So.
Sorry, not to get you on a tangent. Continue.
Yes. But I really feel like this is something that a lot of millennials and a lot of Generation Z are kind of taught. Is this idea that we are destined for something bigger and grander, and this is a very shallow sense of self. This is something that I was taught growing up, and this is something that I grew up with.
Yep.
I don't know if this is something that you grew up with. Honestly, did you grow up with kind of this idea of a deeper self, like you were wanting to be like important to the entire world?
Oh yeah, I mean, we always had the adults in our life saying, "You can be whatever you want to be," which is true to an extent. It's more like you can be whatever your situation allows you to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no way that I'm going to be able to become president. One, I don't want to be president, but two, like I don't have the resources or the money, to become a president. And that's okay. I mean, way back when I became very comfortable with the fact that I was never going to use my acting degree, and I was like, okay, this is it. This is what it is, I guess. But I had to come about that with my own self-realization, and get rid of my own self-pity. But I did feel very, very sad for myself when I realized I wasn't going to be the great stage actress that I thought I was going to be. So yeah, I think that I did, just a different type, or maybe not to the same extent, but I still felt it.
Well, I think this is something interesting about a second viewing of a piece. Is like when you go back to read a book that you always loved, that you're going to pick up different things than you did the first time, because you're a different person than you were the first time,
and you have more knowledge.
You had it exactly. Like the first time that we watched the OA, I was in a completely different place than I am now. That I'm a different person, and this second viewing, the one thing that struck me the most was that conversation between the OA and Steve. But my very first one, my first thing that I was struck by was a conversation between the OA and Mrs. Broderick Allen. And this is something that I'm equating to what I call virtual realities. Is that those of us who were taught that, those of us who were, longing for this, this deeper, this important self, that we've created this virtual reality that we live in, and it's kind of blinded us to the realities that we live in now, and that it's completely disconnected us from reality, and I realize that now that I was very much disconnected from reality, from what was going on around me, from what was going on in my home, in my locality, in my community, and honestly, I'll come back to this about why this stuck out to me the first time, but I really want to hear from you, especially what was it like to live with me during that time? Like what would it look like from the outside, that living with this person who's like living in this virtual reality?
Well, I definitely knew you were living in a virtual reality. And it was hard because I would try to mention it and bring it up to you, and you would just like, no, that's not it. That's not what's going on. No, that's not what's going on. And you would just kind of push me aside and not take me seriously, even though I'm like, no, this is what's happening. I know this is what's happening. Please take me seriously. So it was definitely frustrating. And I mean, I am a millennial. I mean, I have an Instagram, which, by the way, you guys can follow if you want. I really don't mind. I have a Facebook as well, too. And I mainly am on there to keep up with family and that kind of stuff. But I know how addicting it can be. I'm finding now more games have got my attention a little bit more on my phone than social media. But so I understand like the draw and the need to be in that reality that you've created for yourself.
Well, I'm not necessarily just speaking about social media and internet reality. I'm talking about the virtual reality that we kind of create for ourselves, about this other identity that we wish we were. And I really feel like this is why in the very first viewing of the OA Season 1, Episode 1, is that I was so struck by the conversation with Mrs. Broderick Allen, or Miss Broderick Allen. BBA, yeah. Can't talk right now. I'm eating a sandwich. Is that she was burnt out. Mm-hmm. She was burnt out on being a teacher, and she was just trying to, just teach the easy ones. And I think this is something that I was realizing about myself at that time, the very first viewing, was that I was burnt out because I had this idea of me being this important youth minister, of being this, like the best youth minister, and realized that, I was burnt out. I was completely burnt out, and I was still trying to rid myself of that identity and that virtual reality that I created for myself. This virtual reality of being a youth minister. And honestly, I'm not important.
You are to me.
Well, to you. And this is what I'm trying to say, is that I am not that, like
worldly.
No, high up on a pedestal, wholly separated from the rest of society person. I am just a regular human being, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. And I think this is something that the OA does a fantastic job of, and especially setting up here in this very first episode, is showing us, no, you're human, and getting you in touch with your humanity. That angels are just human. In her own way, that's what she's saying.
Yeah.
And so I really feel like, this is my second viewing. I think this is the take that I want to take through the second watching of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always interesting to figure, what draws your attention when you watch something a second time, especially with a series like this, because you do know who she's watching when she's watching that YouTube video. You do know who she's making her videos for. Where she's been and that kind of stuff. To be honest, I thought she was an alien when I first watched it.
Kind of like, the one with Kevin Spacey, and I can't remember the name of it, Capex. That movie where he claims to be an alien, but, he was like inhabited a mental patient or something. Yeah, it was a great movie, but Kevin Spacey, not a good guy.
Yeah, no, not a good guy at all. But anyway, I thought she was an alien, to be honest. Yeah, so I think that's another reason why, because I was like, is she an alien? I don't know. She could be an alien. Spoiler, she's not. She's just a people. But anyway, the thing that kind of struck up with me was like the second half of the episode where she was able to convince a bunch of people that some of them she had met very briefly, some of them she didn't even really talk to sit in an abandoned house with her and keep their door open and sit and listen to her tell a story.
Yeah.
Like, to me, I was like, what? Like, who would do that? Like, no one in their right mind would just be like, okay, stranger on YouTube, I will do what you say.
Who only videos their eye.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Illuminati confirmed. But to be honest, I mean, I can't say that no one would do that in real life, because I know there's some strange circumstances in the real life where that would happen. So, I mean, if you saw a video on YouTube from a stranger, what would make you trust a stranger?
I don't know. It's got to be a lot for me. There are those mystery videos that are kind of uploaded to YouTube. Mm-hmm. Some of them are, I can't remember what they're called, alternate reality games. That like Markiplier has been playing with his entire series, according to Matt Pett. They're for me. I don't know that I would. Like, there are some that are intriguing that I'm like, yeah, I feel like I could probably figure out that puzzle if I really, kind of sat down and actually, thought about it. But there's nothing that really, really makes me want to go out there and do it. Like, I was almost convinced that I could find the gold the artist in Santa Fe hid. And I was pretty sure that I knew where it was and nobody else did, because nobody else was looking there. Nobody else pointed there. And, of course, I didn't go down and go do that. So I didn't trust that stranger.
Well, what would it take for you to trust a stranger in this scenario when it comes to a random stranger inviting you to someplace?
Well, I think this is what I was talking about a little bit. She does stroke the ego of that, that virtual reality a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is
that it's kind of that invitation to be that person that you think that you are, that you want to be, or that you've created this virtuality for.
Do you think? Because I know why. I mean, I get why Steve would go, because he's already met with her. She already asked him to bring people and that kind of stuff. So he probably feels a little guilty that he couldn't, or he didn't try, I should say. So I can kind of see why he would. But I'm kind of surprised that BBA showed up to the house.
Well, and I think that's the reason why is because she pointed exactly to what was going on with her.
Yeah.
And as much as she wanted to deny it, that we have a mutual friend that passed away a few years ago. She really was the reason why we got together, and she had this uncanny, I'm going to call it gift, to be able to speak truth to people exactly where they needed and exactly at the right time that they needed it. Mm-hmm. And I think this is exactly what happened to BBA, was that she was told the exact truth that she needed at the exact time that she needed it.
Mm-hmm. Is she really called BBA?
Yeah, that's what she calls herself at the end of the series.
Okay. All right. For a second, I was like second guessing myself. Like, wait, is this right?
Because her nickname is Betty.
Oh, yeah.
Elizabeth Broderick Allen. So.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Okay. It makes sense now. All right. I'm remembering. Now, has there been a time where you've taken up an invite from a stranger? And if you did, how did it go? And it can be somebody who you kind of sort of knew already, just like how in the OA, some of the people that came to the house already kind of knew about her.
Well, the parent group that we're a part of here in our city, it's just we struck up a conversation at one of the food trucks, and they were like, "Hey, you should check us out on Facebook and come to this first meeting." So, for me as an introvert, I don't like interactions with strangers because I really don't want to open myself up. I don't want to leave my front door open, as it were.
Yeah.
Because I'm afraid that people are going to steal my stuff.
Mm-hmm. And to be honest, too, when that happened, I was like, well, we really need like parent friends in this area, so I will go, but I'm also kind of like skeptical and don't want to be sold something. But everything's okay.
Yeah.
It's perfectly fine. We have fun. Peter has fun, so it's all good. But I mean, it was definitely a leap of faith, and I think it's really hard for, I guess, people in our generation to trust like that anymore, especially because this was just like a one-off interaction. It was just somebody we met at a community gathering, and there wasn't a way for me to do like extensive research on it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
For example, like for daycares, you do extensive research on them. You look at references, you meet the person like ahead of time, you take a tour of the house, blah, 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 blah. I couldn't do any of that with this group. I just had to like trust that this was going to be okay and that nobody was going to try to sell me something. and it was fine. It worked out. I'm glad I did, trust my gut and just dive right into it. But I agree. Like I would categorize that as taking an invite from a stranger.
Well, and it's not necessarily a bad risk.
No.
But it's, it's still one of those things where you're kind of taking a leap of faith. You're stepping out onto uncharted territory. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then...
Like, how do you make friends as adults? Like, seriously.
Exactly. It was amazing. I could tell that she was nervous, too, because I'm sure it's always kind of weird, like, inviting somebody that you don't really know to, like, a group. But
I suddenly had a flashback to one of our first years as a married couple. There was this Irish festival in the city that we were living in, and we went to this Irish festival, and there weren't a whole lot of people there that are kind of looked like they were around our age. Mm-hmm. And so I don't remember how it came up. That was like, it was my job that I had to go over and talk to the couple that was like around our age, and I was like, "Hey, we're like around the same age."
Oh gosh.
Hi.
Sorry, I did not know. It's okay. We're in a better place now. We know our strengths and our weaknesses, so it's all right. But let's flip it. like how. I'm not necessarily saying inviting anybody like to a abandoned house to read stories to them, but how do you get strangers to trust you? And how do you know when they've actually trusted you?
Well, I think empathy plays a big role in that. A lot of, and this is, a lot of work training now is coming into play with this, is that, you got to set the tone that you're there for them, mm-hmm. for their benefit, even though you need something from them. And so that's, a lot of is just kind of saying, showing that you acknowledge how they're feeling. Like, I understand that you're kind of worried, you're a little frightened. Mm-hmm. It's okay. I get that. I was there. I look like I'm creepy or something. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Let's move on.
Yep. Yep. I would agree. I think empathy definitely helps with that. Also, too, what I've noticed is, hopefully this isn't going to turn into like some weird training guide on how to get strangers to trust you, but
how to get strangers to trust you and jump in your van
and go to a strange house. Anyway, so I have found, and this is definitely coming from my customer experience, like customer service experience, and I'm sure many of you in the customer service industry could attest to this, but when you're able to open up about something that not necessarily like is super personal, but just like a story about yourself initially to kind of like ease their mind a little bit. I think that also helps. Like, for example, I was talking to a customer and they had locked their keys in their car. And I was like, oh, yeah, I've done that many times. I know exactly how you feel. I'm going to go ahead and get you in the right direction. Like, and she was just like, oh, okay. Like, it was very brief, but still, I could tell, like, she was like, oh, good, I'm not the only one. You know, like,
yeah.
like right away, like, I could tell that she kind of turned a little bit, you know, and wasn't so panicky.
Well, I think that there's a lot to say for narrative. Mm-hmm. Because honestly, you're not going to be able to relate to a kid who grew up in Russia.
No.
That was the daughter of one of the rich oligarchs in Russia that has these like weird Russian stories. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah. So I don't think that it's still going to be hard for the OA to catch them. But I think that once the way that she told the story, mm-hmm. that she had them kind of trusting her a little bit.
Well, yeah, because it's like, it's her story, and I remember feeling this way when I first watched it, is sensational. You're like, what do you mean? Aren't you from, I don't know, where is it set? Nebraska? No, it's not Nebraska. Some place in the middle of the United States? Like, aren't you from there? Like, yeah. You're telling me that you're from Russia? That's very weird.
You don't have an accent.
Yeah. And so it is a little like sensationalized, but she tells it so well that you're just like, wait, is it true? Or is it not true? And I remember thinking that too, like these stories have to be made up. She has to be like fabricating these story. There's no way. She's just probably just saying the story just to like entertain them and to get them on her side.
And then the brief taking you out of the story when you see Brad Pitt's name under executive producer. And you're like, wait, Brad Pitt?
That was you, but yes, I...
No, this time it was you. And you said, oh, I forgot that he...
Oh, yes. Yeah. But that was at the very end. But I think I don't know if it was a ploy, but she definitely is using her story as a way to try to convince them to do what she needs them to do, a.k.a. interpretive dance.
Spoilers. We're not there yet. We're only in the first episode.
I know. Isn't that weird? So I watched this video on YouTube with a crazy eye, and now I'm learning an interpretive dance. One thing led to another, and I joined a group, and we were just dancing now.
We're going to use the interpretive dance to stop a school shooter.
Yes.
Spoilers.
All right. So that's all I got. Do you have anything extra to add?
No, I think that's it for right now. We're going to pick up on episode 2 here of this. You will hear that after our second episode on The Haunting of Hill House. So remember, if you got anything to say about The Haunting of Hill House before that airs, get it to us by January 20th. And yeah.
Yep. And then also, too, if you have any thoughts on the OA Season 1, or if you want to share your hopes and dreams of Season 2, please get a hold of us. It's really easy. We try to keep things a little bit simple around here. You can find us on social media. We have an Instagram at Patron Saints of Pop Culture. We also are on Facebook and Twitter at Real Honest Faith. And then lastly, if you want to venture over to our website, you can sure do that as well. and that is thehonestfaith.com.
And there you'll be able to see my writing this coming Tuesday about virtual realities in the sense of the internet. So, with all that being said, we invite you to come and join the conversation.
Bye.